Coming up on The Whitney Reynolds Show.
And then my therapist leaned up in his chair and he said, Christopher, it wasn't your fault that you were abused.
The Whitney Reynolds Show is made possible by Yates Protect, a minority-owned business focused on protecting communities and providing solutions to safety problems for public and private institutions, including air purification, metal detectors, thermal detection, and more. Safety is a right, not a privilege. And by O'Connor Law Firm. When it comes to your injuries, we take it seriously. Carrie McCormick, a real estate broker with At Properties. With more than 20 years of experience, she understands the importance of the customer relationship during your real estate journey. Theraderm, committed to developing skin products designed to restore and promote natural beauty. Sciton, because results matter. Additional funding provided by Midwest Moving and Storage, Galileo, The Gumdrop by Delos Therapy, Happy to Meet You, Kevin Kelly with Jameson Sotheby's International Realty, Fresh Dental, Ella's Bubbles, Tutu School Chicago, High Five Sports Camp, and these funders.
Change makers, meet the stories behind laws, national movements, and flipping the script.
I came from a family of 3 girls, and I felt like I had the perfect life. I was the happiest little 5 and 6-year-old and had so much fun as a child.
Marin had what looked like to be the perfect life. That was until one night when everything drastically changed.
When I was a kindergartner, I had been asked by my best friend Ashley to spend the night. And I was excited, that little kid going off to my first sleepover. And after watching a Little Mermaid, we went into her room to go to sleep. She climbed up in her bed and me on the ground in my little sleeping bag, fell asleep, and eventually I woke up to the bedroom door opening and looked over there, and there her uncle was. I thought he was checking to make sure we were asleep. And instead he closed the door, came down to where I was on the ground, told me to be quiet, and I did. I stayed quiet, he sexually abused me, and told me, this is our little secret, no one will believe you, I know where you live, Aaron, I'll come get you. I pinky promised my best friend I would never tell anybody what her uncle was doing.
What is your name? Aaron. And how old are you? 8.
It tore our family apart. I went down the path of self-injury, a suicide attempt, very depressed. This could be happening to your child?
Moving away and going to a new school was cathartic for Aaron until the unthinkable occurred.
I realized by moving was getting me that much closer to the next perpetrator in my life. This time, it was my cousin Brian. Wake up to him sexually abusing me, and for the next almost 2 years, he repeatedly tells me, this is our secret, no one will believe you, you have no proof that I did this. And I believed it. I believed him that no one would believe me. So I stayed silent because my only education came from these perpetrators. At 13 years old, my 11-year-old sister came to me with the same secret. My little sister blurted out the words, Brian's gross. And I knew instantly what that meant and was just filled with anger and rage. So we broke our silence, our abuse ended, reclaimed our voice, and that was the first step in moving forward and healing our lives. Because I had my parents' support and believing my sister and I wanted other people to realize that there is support for them out there as well.
From having support to becoming the support system, Aaron knew a lot had to change.
So I created Aaron's Law in my home state of Illinois.
Oh, this money. We made $2, actually $5. Stop, please. Just go. Okay. Plus, my mom bought this fresh lemonade just to make it look cute.
Back in 2010, I was working my full-time master's level job as a counselor working with youth. I quit my job, tried to figure out a way of how I was going to explain to people that, I'm going to speak about educating kids on the prevention of abuse, because my own state lawmaker said, Erin, we don't talk about that in society. They will never teach this in school. And I made it my mission not just to get this passed in Illinois. I made it a mission to travel to all 50 states, testifying to lawmakers on the importance on this.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we just watched your story. What does it feel like for you to see that play out?
It's empowering because it's a silent epidemic so many people don't talk about. And, it's not something I'm ashamed of, and it's something I want to put a face and voice on so others can break the silence. And, perpetrators want their victims to say hush hush because that's what they do. They groom them, they threaten them. And so it's my hope by speaking out now for 17 years to encourage others to find their voice and not live in shame.
17 years. When did you first make that step of, this is my story and I'm not ashamed?
My senior year of high school, I decided the diary I wrote and kept all my secrets in about what was happening, the abuse, and I decided to turn it into a book to put a face and voice on this silent epidemic. And it's been an incredible journey to see where it has taken me.
When you say put a face on it, what gave you that oomph to know I'm okay being that face?
Well, I was going down such a destructive path in my life. Suicide attempts, self-harm, I was a mess. And then I realized by going down that path, I was letting perpetrator win, and keep me, angry and upset. And it wasn't healthy. Why give him another day of my life? And so I kind of got empowered after confronting him to reclaim my voice and be like, I want to be that voice for others. And, I've never had a problem speaking publicly about it.
Well, and being that voice for others, you're not just that voice, you're like a lawmaker for others. Yeah. How does it feel to have Erin's Law out there now?
It's amazing. I was told by my state senator back in 2009, Erin, I agree, we need to talk to kids about this, but they will never teach personal body safety education in school. It'll go nowhere. So I'm not going to introduce it. I'll never forget sitting there saying on the phone to him, well, if you're not going to help me, I will find somebody that will. And I kept writing every legislator in Illinois, letting them know I'm not going away till I find one. And I found one in the small town of Dixon, Illinois, Ronald Reagan's hometown.
Yeah.
And he introduced it, and it took me 3 years testifying to legislators to get it passed. And kids are not just being abused in Illinois. So I quit my full-time master's level counseling job with kids and decided to pursue it in all 50 states.
And that's a task. If it took 3 years in Illinois,
Yes.
What makes you keep pushing for the yeses?
Over the years, I've been able to start showing evidence that this law works in the more states it's been passed. So I'm now going to these legislators in their states going, here's your proof. Look at what this perpetrator's been doing to years, and look how it stopped because this law. All it took was an hour of personal body safety education for a kid to come forward and put this man behind bars. And so I've just been traveling from each state, and I just keep pushing. Some states, it takes nearly a decade to get it passed in. The reason I show people that you can keep, eventually getting it is because legislators that give you trouble don't stay in office forever. And you eventually find those. It's amazing how many legislators have come to me and say, Erin, me too.
Like you said, when you put a face to something and you put it's not just a secret, it's not something you have to keep hush hush, let's talk about it. So with Erin's Law, that's what kids are doing. They're talking about it.
Exactly. They're getting educated. They're being empowered. They learn the difference between safe and unsafe touch, safe and unsafe secret. Who are those safe adults you can go to if something is happening to you? I sit in front of legislators and testify and say, we mandate across this country tornado drills, bus drills, fire drills. We do the gun drills now. We do suicide prevention, bully intervention. But when it comes to personal body sexual abuse prevention education, we don't talk about it. People get uncomfortable. But you can't rely on parents to talk about this. They only talk about stranger danger. 93% of the time, kids are being hurt by the person they know, the coach, the family member, the youth group, the neighbor, somebody they know. They're safer talking to the stranger behind them at the checkout. So if we can't get parents talking about this, where's one place kids spend most of their time? In the classroom.
What is next for you besides getting it in every state?
I got 13 states left. It's past now in 37, going state to state. And so obviously my goal is to get it in these last remaining states. And kids are not just being abused in America. I'm making connections with people on the other side of the world, trying to get this passed in India, China, Germany, other countries. I have people reaching out to me asking, what do I write my legislators in my country? And I like to tell people, you can't change the past, so why focus there? Why not focus on the future and do something positive with this?
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Stereotypes can be broken. Our next guest is doing that when it comes to mental health. He's being bold with his story, opening up about his past.
And I've been, insecure my whole life, right? So, family insecurity is like the toughest thing because I'm a black man in America, and that's already tough from a systematic standpoint. And then you meet people and everyone has these expectations and everybody want you to be something. I'm just trying to hold it together.
I used to live in the basement begging for it all. It's my imagination, it's the best that they recall. I used it as a youngin', now it's life for the grave, but for me I choose so, no longer enslaved.
Christopher Lamarck is vulnerable, open, and going there, doing the hard work on his past. He's recognized mental health is a real issue that needs to be discussed and available for all people. That's what led him to start Coffee, Hip Hop, and Mental Health. 3 words that changed his life and are becoming a lighthouse for others to see past their situation.
Being displaced as a child, abused, and also going through many levels of what it meant to be homeless. For the majority of my life, this organization is all about fighting the extreme issues like poverty, food insecurity, and poor mental health. That is the heart. That is the why.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Normalizing talking about mental health. That's what you're about.
Absolutely.
So how did you get to this point? Because it's one of those things that as you're creating a brand and actually creating 3 words that people know very well now, those didn't evolve overnight. And did some of that come from your childhood?
Yeah. There would be no Coffee, Hip Hop, and Mental Health if it wasn't for the things that happened at 6453. That's why it sits at the very bottom of the logo. It sits small, right? Because I look at that as my superpower.
When you say that number, is that your old address?
Yeah, south side of Chicago.
What happened there?
I lived with my mother's brother and his family. And we went through what I considered physical, emotional, and mental abuse. I didn't realize that life was a little different for me until I started watching The Cosby Show, Family Matters, Full House. Because the dynamic, the social and the family dynamic was extremely different. And I was like, oh, well, he talked to Theo. He actually had a conversation with Theo Stern, but there was no hitting. There was no being locked in the basement, which is what happened to me. I was often locked in the basement through a span of 12 years. Time I got home, 3:30 in the afternoon, 2 o'clock in the morning, I was in the basement. That essentially took my childhood, right? My teenage years and everything.
When you saw some of these other images of what maybe the TV world depicted as a family, did you say anything?
No, I didn't say anything. I mean, how could I? Because I'm still trying to understand, is this entertainment? Is my life the real template? Or is TV just fantasy?
Did your schoolwork and did any of your teachers see that something's up with this kid?
No, not in that way, because they didn't have the tools or the language to understand that I was just an abused kid acting out because of that, because school was my refuge. So I did everything at school that I couldn't do at home.
Right.
Like be a normal kid, play. So I didn't have time to study and things of that nature. I was always trying to vie for attention.
You're 14, 15. What progressed in a way that you're like, okay, I'm now almost a man. How do I do this?
I knew I was older and I knew I was being mistreated. And I remember the day my aunt asked me to go to the store to grab food for my cousins. But I had been sitting in a corner all day. I'm 15 years old, sitting in a corner, and I haven't eaten. And she wants me to go to the corner store to buy a loaf of bread or something for my younger cousins. So I go to the store, and I had already developed a habit out of eating from the garbage can or stealing from the corner store, right? It was because I knew I would be in the basement, so take snacks like to be in the basement. So I go to the corner store, and I see that the guy is watching me, but I didn't care. Everyone knew everybody in the neighborhood back then. And he saw me steal probably some candy, and then he called my cousin Corey. And from there, my aunt found out. I was in trouble when I got home. My aunt was hitting me, and I started fighting back. And that was the first time I was just through. First of all, you're mad at me for stealing, but you haven't fed me all day, and I've been in the corner, and I'm 15 years old. And this has been going on for 12 years. So I fought back, and she pushed me out. And she put me out, and I walked the streets for about a few days, slept in my cousin's car. I went from living in that environment to living with cousins in Hoffman Estates, Illinois, which is like extremely different. Extremely different, right? I'm from the south side of Chicago. Wow. I was isolated like the bulk of my life, and now I'm going to James B. Conant High School. But you can't take a unhealed or troubled person and put them in a nice spot and dress them and think everything's going to be okay. So I rebelled from that.
And that's what you really preach about. And I'm just going to say the word preach, but
sure, I mean,
you shout it out loud with coffee, hip hop, mental health.
You got to do the hard work. And I tell people all the time that while healing is cool, it's also a marathon.
Yeah.
But hip hop was my first form of therapy. That's why it sits in the middle of the logo, because if it wasn't for hip hop, I would have killed myself a long time ago. Always had the pen, right? Or the creativity, like to create something from nothing.
And the coffee, hip hop, and mental health aspect of it. Coffee is something that a lot of people like. I'm sure our viewers right now are like, yeah, I like coffee.
Yes.
Hip hop.
Yeah.
Those are two kind of like fun. You see those on a lot of shirts, maybe those words. But the mental health, that is something that we don't see every day.
Yeah. And I'm not even a coffee guy. I only go and drink coffee to curb appetite or to wake up. And I just fall apart. I start crying. And what I recognized what was happening in that moment was all the stuff I was doing in my entire life to hold it together, it just wasn't enough anymore. And I was sitting there and I said, you know what? I got to go to therapy for Christopher. And so that mental and emotional breakdown like became my greatest breakthrough, because it was in that moment I made a decision. I'm not going to die. I don't want to die. And then my therapist leaned up in his chair and he said, Christopher, it wasn't your fault that you were abused. And that, maybe someone said that to me before, but I have never heard it in that way. I had never been present enough to hear it. And I went home one day and I wrote down coffee, because when you think about coffee, it's a metaphor for let's have a conversation, right?
Right.
The Black and brown community, we're not taught to like go take care of you. We're just now hearing in the last few years, self-love, self-care. We're taught to survive, and we have to survive through it. Coffee, hip hop, and mental health is our way of normalizing the mental health conversation and normalizing therapy, but essentially rebranding the whole concept. It's the broken language that we're sharing because we're all in survivor mode. And when you're surviving, you're exchanging survival conversation. So no one's talking about living.
The most beautiful things about coffee, hip hop, and mental health, it's a store, you sell things, but the money's going back to help people have therapy.
Yeah, so it's bigger than that. So we started feeding families, gifting people with groceries, right? And then we say, you know what? At the top of the year, in 2021, we're going to start paying for people to go to therapy. And we start selling more coffee and more merchandise. So when we opened up the coffee shop in November 18, 2020, we already saw that everybody, every race, every color, every person from every neighborhood, not just Black and brown, needed this. That's the beautiful thing about the coffee shop. Yes, our goal is to take care of 250 people at minimum every year, to put them through therapy, to help them start their healing journey.
Thank you so much for coming on.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Now we turn to a familiar face, one that is changing it up for women in Hollywood.
Maggie Q is making waves as the newest action hero in the thriller The Protégé. On the big screen, she is breaking down barriers and building a platform for women who feel underrepresented in the action genre.
How cool is it to be a woman with ethnicity in this role
Thank you.
on the main stage?
Awesome. Just, I think the right time, the right script, to do a movie at this level with this director and these actors and this script was really the right thing to do. Because if it was anything less than this, I honestly wouldn't have been interested, because it's not like we haven't seen an action movie before. We have, but working at this level with these people who were so dedicated to the right product was the difference and made this different for me.
And when you were reading through the initial lines in the Vietnam War,
yes,
did that hit home for you?
Yeah, I mean, I have an immigrant mother who immigrated in the 70s and who, is a huge inspiration to me. And so anytime I can portray a woman of her ethnicity on screen with strength, I think it makes me proud. Because men are pretty easy. There's a lot of women men like, it's not hard, but when women like you, I think it has to be earned.
And being that sign of a strong woman is just a huge honor, I believe, to be in this day and age where we need people to look up to.
I certainly admire strong women, in whatever area that is. I mean, it's always something that always strikes me and always makes me feel proud.
What did the movie teach you?
Just like having boundaries. No matter what environment I'm in, as a woman in Hollywood, you still weirdly have to stand up for yourself. If you want something, you have to be vocal about it. And if you're not, it's no one else's fault but your own.
Our next changemaker is Whitney Reynolds show expert and attorney, Kevin O'Connor.
Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
You're a familiar face to our show because we know that you are on a mission to create change, and you do that every day through your clients. But something our viewers might not know is that you made a change in your own life, Kevin. Tell us about how you made the shift to actually be an attorney.
So I grew up in Chicago. I was one of 9 kids. We lived in a very small house that's only had 4 bedrooms. It was kind of, a blue-collar family. It's in the city. As I grew up, we didn't have very much money and everything else. My mother only finished the 8th grade. My dad didn't make it out of high school, but education was very important to them. So I was kind of one of the younger of the group, so I was managing to not have to I'd get away with a lot, not have to read, do all those fun. I didn't even like to read. It was kind of funny. So by the time I got to 8th grade, I think I only read 1 book on my own, which was really amazing, right? And so I get into high school. I went away to the seminary. I then decided I wanted to go to law school to make a change. But before I did that, I'm in undergrad, and I said, I'm really not a very good reader. This is going to be a problem, right? So I actually majored in English as one of my double majors to force me to read.
So what I'm hearing you say is sometimes you just have to catapult yourself into change.
You do, and by the time the shift came, and I said I really wanted to make a difference in people's lives. I want to try and not just make money doing what you do, but change actual laws or every lawyer has that dream, and a lot of lawyers tell you, well, get that dream out of your head when you start, and I never believed them. I said there are things we can do, there are laws we can change, there are policies we can change that if you really push it and demand it as part of your case.
Tell us some of those policies that you have changed over the years.
So probably one of the most interesting ones I've had, and I really respect them for it. I had a Metra case that went on, and the man who was sitting across the table like we are right now at a deposition was a more senior person there, and we were talking about, it was a tragedy where one young man from out of state got killed, didn't understand how our train system worked, and I was listening to what he said, and I said, explain to me how the system works. I'm like, you guys have GPS on the trains, right? You know where they're at all times. And he goes, yes, we do. And I said, you actually have a PA system that's inside the station itself? And he goes, yeah, we do. And I said, can you remotely make announcements? And he goes, yeah, we have that capability, we just don't do it. And I looked at him and I said, trains that don't stop at the station cause most of the accidents because they're express trains or whatever they were. And he looked at me and he goes, yeah. And I said, couldn't you just announce to the people there, this is an express train, please stand back, don't cross the tracks, so that people aren't rushing to get to the other side. Because you can't tell optically as a train's approaching you how far away it is or how fast it's going or if it's going to stop. You can't tell when you see it at a distance. And he looks at me and goes, Mr. O'Connor, I want to tell you something. The things you told me, I'm not going to say it on the record, but I really appreciate some of your ideas, and I'm going to bring it back to the board. And I truly believed him, and he said, I'm really going to see if we can do some of those things. And then we settled our case and it was confidential and everything else, but 2 months later, I noticed that they started making those announcements on the train, and I was really excited to see that.
For the everyday viewer that's watching right now, that's like, I don't know where to start when it comes to making change in my own life and making big change. Because what the story you just told is like a huge change, it's saving lives. Where would you tell them to start?
It starts in everyday communities. I mean, there are people that like start with their petition. They start, you know, they have a tragedy that happens in their life. They have an experience that they see, and they say, you know what, this law needs to change. And people think, oh, I can't make that difference. But if you get enough signatures together, if you're passionate enough about what you do, laws are made by the people. I mean, they're brought to your representatives, they're brought to your, mostly on a state level, to your state senators, and they're presented, and if you're loud enough and you're boisterous enough and you're persistent enough, and they know that the votes will affect them, they're gonna keep pushing your agenda. And there's plenty of people that have done that with great laws recently when there's been a tragedy where their child gets killed or their parent gets killed or somebody gets injured that they shouldn't have been injured, and they help move those laws.
How do you comfort people in the midst of change? Because that's one of the things that we haven't really touched on in the show, is change is sometimes very uncomfortable.
So especially in our business, one of the things everyone thinks, oh, they're just looking for money, right? I mean, but I gotta tell you, most of my clients where somebody's tragically hurt or killed, money isn't really the motivating factor for them. And in our society, civil cases, the only thing you're entitled to is money, technically. But there's been many of cases to where I had one against one of the major institution hospitals, and part of what I suggested that they do, and it was an error that somebody made that caused a family member to die, and the family had money, they didn't really care about the money. They're like, I just don't want to see this happen to somebody else. And so what we ended up doing is the institution actually put a plaque with his face on it in the employee entrance, like that was going to be permanently there, so that when every employee walked in, they knew that what they did, or if they're tired or if they make a mistake, it affects a real life. And the family was so excited about that, the money aspect became so much less important. They said, that's really what I want, because I don't want to see somebody else go through this, or that my family member's just a name or a number and people don't care. And on the other end, it showed that the institution really cared, right? I mean, because there are real people behind these companies, when you dig deep enough, that do care.
So with change, find out why you're passionate about that change and go with that.
And find somebody else on the other side who's passionate as well. So it's a dual thing. If you can't find the other person that shares your passion that can make the change, you're never going to be able to do it.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, but thank you for having me.
From trauma to helping others triumph through the lessons she's learned. Our next guest is a true change maker across the board.
Change. What does it take to create change? Well, for Annette Ramirez, it took almost everything in a hospital bed.
I went into the hospital on August 1st, 2012 for a routine hysterectomy, something that 600,000 women in America have every year. It was my first surgery ever. As a matter of fact, I have 2 children, but they came rapidly, so I had natural childbirth. But I really needed to get it done because the doctor had found a very large fibroid on my uterus. And so when my husband came in the next day, I was having a lot of pain. I found myself kind of in and out of consciousness. And I remember being on the bathroom floor. And so in the morning, they called my husband and told him that he needed to get to the hospital as soon as possible because they think during surgery that the doctor had cut my colon. So my husband, not really knowing anything, basically said, well, you know, just fix it, right? If you nicked it, just fix the colon. And he said to my husband that I think it's worse. I think she has developed sepsis. So you need to get to the hospital right away and she needs to go into the ICU. I was in complete septic shock. I was put into a medically induced coma, which I was in for 4 months. And when I woke up, I had skin grafts over my complete body, and my arms and my legs had both been amputated.
There were many battles in her recovery. However, one fight she discovered was not just for herself, but for others.
Whenever you have a medical negligence in the state of California, the maximum amount that you can get for your pain and your suffering is $250,000. This is what the state of California values my life as, and my family's life as. $250,000 doesn't amount to anything when you're talking about 24/7 care, when you're talking about mental, physical, and occupational therapy. In November 2022, we have a bill on the California ballot, and it's called FIPA. It's the Fairness for Injured Patients Act. And what we are trying to do is to raise that cap in the state of California from $250,000 to today's standard. I really want this bill to pass for other patients who were harmed.
Today's guest didn't stop with the struggle. They kept pushing. They kept pushing for change. Remember, your story matters.
The Whitney Reynolds Show is made possible by Yates Protect, a minority-owned business focused on protecting communities and providing solutions to safety problems for public and private institutions, including air purification, metal detectors, thermal detection, and more. Safety is a right, not a privilege. And by O'Connor Law Firm. When it comes to your injuries, we take it seriously. Carrie McCormick, a real estate broker with At Properties. With more than 20 years of experience, she understands the importance of the customer relationship during your real estate journey. Theraderm, committed to developing skin products designed to restore and promote natural beauty. Sciton, because results matter. Additional funding provided by Midwest Moving and Storage, Galileo, The Gumdrop by Delos Therapy, Happy to Meet You, Kevin Kelly with Jameson Sotheby's International Realty, Fresh Dental, Ella's Bubbles, Tutu School Chicago, High Five Sports Camp, and these funders.
Go beyond the interview with Whitney Reynolds and her 52-week guide of inspiration. The book goes deeper into the topics you see on The Whitney Reynolds Show. To get your copy for $12.95 plus shipping and handling, go to whitneyreynolds.com/store and use code PBS. For more information on today's program, visit whitneyreynolds.com or follow us on social media. On Twitter @Whitney Reynolds and on Instagram @Whitney_Reynolds.